Hello and welcome to Tuesday Tea Time with Elsa. Today I am out in the garden. The plum tree is just starting to blossom above me. And we have my daughter's puppy, Kada, hanging out with us for tea time today. So I had a couple of different things that came up this week. Due to a couple of questions from students, which is always a good stimulus for my brain, and due to some things that I've been thinking about myself as well. So today, I wanted to talk about training in two different forms. Training in a more direct impact on the horse and training on a more indirect impact on the horse. So the thing about freedom-based training is a lot of times we try and do things the indirect way because we meet less resistance. Good morning, Florentine. Welcome to tea time. So with freedom-based training where we have no tools, we are going to do things the more indirect way, which means we can see there's an issue or a problem or a skill that needs to be developed, and we don't go directly to it. We go in around the side of it, and we train something that's easier than the goal to build up to the goal. And one of the ways this works really well is to think a little bit about the impact the environment has on the horses. And one particular way that I was talking about with a student is the impact the herd life has on the horses. So basically in freedom-based training, we take this very simple premise that when the horse's stress level is at the right level, they are going to respond to everything you do with thinking, yielding, or playing. And if you think about it, if your horse never ever pushed into you, and never ever tried to get away from you, and never got frozen and didn't know what to do, that would be pretty good horse friendship. Like, you almost wouldn't need to train that horse. And so the indirect way to train is, oh, incoming Kada puppy. There she is. Hi, Kada. The indirect way to train is to train the horse to have the ability to lower their stress in many different situations. And that's what we do a lot of in freedom-based training, is we teach the horse self-soothing methods that are easy to use around people in working situations so that they know how to lower their stress, so that their natural response to everything is going to become thinking, yielding, or playing. So that's the indirect route to training. Thank you, Nikki. Yes, Kada is, I get to keep her for a couple of days while my daughter is doing a course, and she's keeping me on my toes. So, with puppies, with horses, with all of them, I think about indirect training, which is how do I set up the environment so that the horse or the dog or whatever animal I'm working with has the most beneficial stress level, which means not too high, not too low when they're interacting with me. When stress gets really, really low, animals go to sleep, which is really good. It's really natural. It's very important for health, and low stress is beneficial. But I actually like to think of a mid-range of stress as being the most beneficial for a good conversation. So when I'm having a conversation with a horse or a dog or an animal or a person, I'm hoping the stress is in that mid-range where they are most likely to think, yield, and play. Now, if you have a horse that is not inclined to be in that stress level, some are inclined to be much higher stress, where they are going to be in more of a reactionary mode, and they're going to push into things, run away from things, or freeze up and just not know how to react. And that higher stress state is going to be harder to communicate with. It's going to be harder to have a relationship with. So if you have a horse that is inclined to be at a higher stress state, then it's going to be good if you can think about impacting their environment, okay? And one of the big keys of their environment is, who do they live with? So you will notice in horse herds, some horses are really good at lowering stress in the herd. Some horses are really good at raising stress in the herd. This is going to impact everybody who lives in that herd. So one of the things I say all the time is, when you're raising baby horses, I think it is far more beneficial to put your time and your energy into lowering the stress or helping the mothers of those foals develop really good coping mechanisms so that they can then pass that on to their foals. They can be a good example of interacting with playing, yielding, and thinking. And, that doesn't just go for foals. Sometimes that goes for the really dominant members of our horse herds. If we have a horse that's very dominant or very difficult, sometimes working with their friends is going to have a more indirect impact on that dominant horse's life. If you can develop the other members of the herd, then they can work on that one high stress individual 24 hours a day when you're not there. And sometimes that's very, very beneficial. So that's just something to think about, is in all of our training, when we train in a more indirect way, we are either trying to set up the environment so their stress is at a good level, or we're trying to give the horse really good coping tools so that they know how to interact with a lot of different environments in ways that result in a very positive stress level. Those are our indirect training methods. And it's what we focus on in freedom-based training, because we can't force the horse to do very much without any tools. Now, once the horse is already in that lower stress state where they are responding with thinking, yielding, and playing, then we can become more direct without needing tools. So if you have a horse that has a tendency to push against you in a way that feels unpleasant, or run away from you in a way that makes it difficult to have a conversation with them, having the right tool, like a flag or a rope or a halter or a round pen, is going to make that conversation a lot easier. Once that horse does not have the inclination to run away or push into you, then we can start to work more directly, even without tools. So that means that I'm able to put my hands on the horse and use my hands to suggest movement in any number of directions: forward, backwards, left, right. And this is what we call drive. Okay, I'm asking them to move away from me. And the reason that I think drive is so important is that drive creates trust. And someone asked me this morning, why is that? Why does drive create trust? And the answer is because when you push a horse, what happens is they change their focus. They were looking at one thing, and then when you push them, they end up looking at something else. They end up changing their focus. And if they feel better after they change their focus, they will start trusting you to ask them to do things. So in freedom-based training, what we do is we spend a lot of time really contemplating how and when and where does my horse feel better. And the way we recognize that is if they are thinking, yielding, and playing, they probably feel better. If they are leaning towards fight, flight, or freeze, they might feel a little bit worse. Freeze is the interesting one because freeze generally is a little better than fight or flight when it's a mental freeze, obviously not a catatonic freeze. But if it's just a mental freeze where they're unsure what to do, that's usually a slightly better feeling than an outright, no, I have to get away and protect myself. So if we think about in freedom-based training where we don't have tools, we're going to use drive to create trust. And the reason that is I push them to think about something different. And if they feel better after my push, they are going to start wanting me to push them again. And that creates trust in the kind of decisions that I make as a human. Now, if a horse changes focus on their own and feels better, that's great too, because that means that they're starting to trust themselves. They decided to change focus and they felt better, and therefore they trust their own decisions. And that's a good thing too. It's just a matter of, are we developing a horse to trust the human more? Or are we developing a horse to trust the horse more? Or some balance of those two ideas. Oh, Anne, I'm so glad that you like that idea about drive and how to look at it. Obviously, with freedom-based training, drive is very minimal. It's very subtle. It's not the kind of hardcore drive you might use in other training. But the same reasoning applies whether you're doing the subtle version or the intense version. If you can cause a horse to change focus and they feel better because they are now thinking about something that is less stressful for them, they will want you to make more choices for them. And we teach that through drive because it's the easiest way to teach it. It's the most natural way with horses. But eventually you can do it through draw, where they follow you. You look somewhere, you change your focus, and the horse changes focus with you. They follow your draw of where you're thinking. And that's another way to do it. But usually you have to earn that by using your drive first. So your drive causes change of focus if you know how to end your drive at the right time. So if we ask a horse to yield the shoulders and they happen to notice something that's very concerning after that yield, we might want to do it again. We might ask for another step. And if in the other step they notice something that's very soothing to them, that's where we want to stop, because they're going to best remember the last thing they felt in association with that drive. So when you're asking your horse to do something, whether you're doing it with tools or you're doing it without tools, the timing is going to be the key in using that drive to develop trust. And as I was saying, that's a more direct way of training. And we do direct training with freedom-based training, but in freedom-based training, we focus a lot on the indirect as well, which is how do we develop their environment, develop their friends, develop their puppies, whoever's around. How do we develop the circumstance so the horse naturally has a lower stress level? When their stress level is lower, and they're going to respond with think, yield, and play, not with fight or flight, then we can get more direct. And when we get more direct, it's through drive until they start to really trust our human decisions, and then it's through draw. So I hope that is some good food for thought for all of you. I am going to watch the puppy run and play in the garden, and then I'm going to go do some work with the horses. And I hope that you guys have a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and I will see you next Tuesday. Make sure and send me questions. If you have questions, it's always fun for me to think about how that all fits together, and I'm happy to talk about it in tea time anytime. Have a good day.